Hello there. Welcome to the Football Outsiders Radio Hour on Twitch. We are broadcasting live on twitch.tv/FB Outsiders. Hi, I am Aaron Schatz, joined as always by Mike Tanier to talk some football. We've got a couple of guests coming on the show today. Greg Bedard will be here to talk about the New England Patriots and the big moves that happened in Foxborough over the last few days. Parker Fleming is going to come on a little later to do a college football preview, but neither of them is here yet. So we're sort of flying by the seat of our pants a little bit this week. We thought we would start by going into this week's Scramble for the Ball and talking about some of the awards and the odds for winning various awards in the NFL. So I've got my Scramble for the Ball open on my computer screen. Mike, you've got it open too.
Yep.
Let's talk about the MVP award for 2021 first, because I think my favorite part of this list, and they didn't list everybody who you can bet on, because you can bet on like so many different players.
Right.
I liked that Jacoby Brissett's odds of winning the MVP award are the same. Are the same as Ezekiel Elliott or Aaron Donald. I like that.
Yeah.
That was good.
Or Daniel Jones, guys who like their teams are straight up saying, hey, we're going to go out there with this guy, and this is our big playoff push. This is our quarterback, Daniel Jones, year 3. He has the same odds as Jacoby Brissett of winning MVP award.
I don't know if whichever site that they got these, they either got these odds, some of them come from Bovada and some of them are from DraftKings. Mm-hmm. I wonder if just plus 10,000 is the highest that any of the odds go, and therefore any player is at plus 10,000 who's not at lower than that, because otherwise, like having a backup quarterback in Miami have the same odds of winning MVP as Aaron Donald or Ezekiel Elliott, or even other quarterbacks like Daniel Jones or Jared Goff seems a little ridiculous.
Have I got bad news for you? The odds at DraftKings go up to plus 20,000. So here's some of the people you can get at plus 20,000. Austin Eckler. That's not.
I'd rather take Austin Eckler at plus 20,000 than Jacoby Brissett at plus 10,000. I think.
I'm with you with that. Travis Kelce at plus 20,000.
Oh, I definitely rather take that one. Yeah.
Right. Am I on the right list? Did I most valuable player award? Yes. So they go down. There's also guys like Mitch Trubisky at plus 20,000.
Another backup.
Yeah. Ryan Fitzpatrick. Chris Godwin, there's a guy with like maybe a weird story that he did it, but you can see it happening. So yeah, you can go way down a rabbit hole. Myles Gaskin at plus 20,000. There's another guy. You can come up with a wild scenario where the Dolphins are great and he catches 100 passes and runs for 1,000 yards and makes you makes you 200 to 1.
I've said I think the best bet for MVP is Mahomes at 5 to 1.
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine that the odds that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league this year are any lower than 50%. And if he's the best quarterback in the league, he probably will win the MVP award, because that MVP award usually goes to the best quarterback in the league.
Right.
So I think plus 500 is honestly too high odds. Like I would happily bet on that. I think those odds should be much closer to something like plus 250.
Right. That is going to absorb a lot of people, because that's a lot of meat on the bone for such a kind of a prohibitive favorite. I think that's not the right word, prohibitive favorite, but such a strong favorite in that field. I'm surprised that Josh Allen is sitting down plus 1,200, because I think a lot of people will look at this and say, it's risk. It's less risky for him. He's got a better supporting cast. He's got a better offensive line, and these bets tend to attract people who are like trying to find the next big thing. I think in this case, somebody like Allen would be the next big thing. So I consider him at plus 1,200, but Mahomes at plus 500 is just the probability of hitting is just too high.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's interesting that Deshaun Watson is still listed at plus 3,500. I don't think I would take that bet at this point.
That's some. He's going to get traded to the Dolphins and win MVP.
I might take Baker Mayfield at plus 3,500 at 35 to 1.
Yeah, you also have to be able to root for the person every week. So that kind of like the whole Deshaun thing. I can't root for them every week. I don't want to make money off of that.
That's a thing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Kyler Murray being at plus 1,600 is interesting because that's the same as Lamar Jackson, and it's better than Prescott, Stafford, or Herbert.
I know.
Do you think the Cowboys and Rams will be better? I mean, we don't think FO does not think the Chargers will be better than the Cardinals this year, but we agree with everyone that the Cowboys and Rams will be better than the Cardinals this year.
We could see a scenario where Herbert gets it with like a 5,300 yard season for a team that goes 10-7. I mean, that's a scenario where he just blows it up statistically. But I think Kyler Murray sitting there is schmuck bait. That's basically what that is. I don't know who would be betting that at this point, but it's sitting there almost like an attractive nuisance for a casual fan who is expecting him to be better than I think most of us think he'll be in year 3.
Yeah. Let's scroll down to Coach of the Year.
This is wild.
What do you think is most wild about the Coach of the Year odds?
Urban Meyer at plus 1,400.
Well, I mean, if Jacksonville has a good season, doesn't he win the award?
Yeah. I mean, let's go down. What if the Falcons have a good season, doesn't Arthur Smith win the award?
Yeah.
I guess we're betting right now on the Jaguars having. I know what you're going to say. It's like, well, if they have like a 9-8 season, a lot of times the Coach of the Year is the guy who takes the surprise team to like the wild card. But are we really anticipating that with Urban Meyer and with the Jacksonville Jaguars?
No, I would think the better bet here is, I mean, the favorite is Brandon Staley at 10-1.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty good. Belichick at 12-1, where I think if he turns the Patriots around and puts them back in the playoffs,
right,
I could definitely see Belichick winning this award. And then the other one I think is Kyle Shanahan at 14-1. The fact is people in the media love Kyle Shanahan.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the thing. We have to sort of metagame our colleagues. It's different with MVP where everybody kind of sees you have to metagame our colleagues here because it is like the best new artist Grammy where it's somebody who had a hit that you weren't expecting. The guys, Andrew and Brian, Brian picked Kyle Shanahan and Andrew picked Sean Payton, which I guess is interesting. Yeah, if they have a big season and the Jameis, they turn around after Drew Brees, I could see that happening.
Yeah, if the Saints have a big season with Winston at quarterback, I could definitely see Payton as the Coach of the Year.
Yeah. I'll tell you right now, maybe the Jaguars have a better chance of having a good season than the Jets. But if both of them come out and go 8-9 or something like that, Robert Saleh is going to get it over Urban Meyer. I think he's more popular.
I think that's true.
Yeah, so that would crush any Urban fantasies, Urban renewal.
I think if you think about who the writers like, it's not Urban Meyer.
Right.
They like Shanahan and they like Robert Saleh. Yes.
Yeah, he's got a couple of buddies from his media gigs and all, but no, in general, our group is going to probably go elsewhere. Again, with the assumption that one of these teams has or a couple of these teams have surprise seasons that are better than you think.
It's funny.
And another one who could do it is Dan Campbell.
Well, that's the funny thing is who the odds think can and can't have surprise seasons.
Yes.
Because you have, thinking about turnaround teams, the Chargers 10-1, the Jaguars 14-1, Arthur Smith, Falcons 14-1, Carolina, Matt Rule 16-1, Vic Fangio, Denver 16-1. Detroit, Dan Campbell 40-1.
Yeah.
Houston, David Culley 65-1.
Right. And I can see Culley, but Campbell, and by the way, you're noticing, Kevin Clark just did a thing on Campbell. The rehabilitation of Dan Campbell's personality is underway here. And I think it's warranted at this point. A lot of us like me are kind of going with the cement head routine here. We've been saying this over and over again. It's not unfeasible for that team to wind up 7, 8, 9 wins.
I'm going to pause for you. Greg is joining us now, Good. So I'm going to let Philip know to bring Greg in on the video. There we are. Greg,
Hello.
How you doing today?
Good. What's up?
We're just talking about Coach of the Year odds. They people who make the odds do not think David Culley is winning Coach of the Year.
I would be in that camp too. Poor David Culley.
But our man Belichick has the second best odds at 12-1.
I think this could be a decent chance to for him to win it. I mean, if he contends for the division or perhaps wins the division with a rookie quarterback, I think he's always been handicapped. They're like, well, he has Tom Brady, or they're always good, and so he gets mentioned. But I think it's been a while since he's actually won the award. But yeah, having a really successful season with a rookie quarterback, that could get him another one.
Is that a Rutgers R I see in the background there, sir?
That is, yes.
No Rutgers game tonight because campus is underwater, but let's represent.
Love it. There you go. I'm class of '97. That's actually my wife's letter from 4 years on the women's golf team and being a 2-year captain and stuff like that. So I try to make it look like it's my R, but it's really her R. But we both graduated from there.
I'm a Rutgers dad. There's a hat on daddy's head where all the money goes.
There you go.
We're representing.
Nice.
Unfortunately, yes, Rutgers is underwater right now, as are a lot of things in New Jersey. We escaped. I got a flash flood warning on my phone this morning, but I think here in Massachusetts, we escaped the worst of it all.
My neighbor's mowing the lawn, as you can hear. So that tells you we did pretty okay here. It's dry enough to mow the lawn during the Twitch cast.
So Greg, for folks who know, he's written for Football Outsiders Almanac in the past. His website is bostonsportsjournal.com. So he is plugged into everything Boston sports, and in particular covering the New England Patriots, who made the biggest news of the week. By far, everybody was shocked when they cut Cam Newton on Tuesday morning. So I'm curious, Greg, how much did you see Mac Jones winning the quarterback job coming? And then how much did you see Cam Newton getting cut coming?
Well, Mac Jones winning the job, in my mind, he clearly won the job. It was just a matter of, was Bill Belichick going to actually name him the starter and go forward with a rookie quarterback? I did not know the answer to that question. And I certainly saw the way he handled things. I mean, I was at every practice, all the joint practices, all the games. And so I saw everything, off-season workouts, everything. I was not surprised at all that he won the job. I thought he clearly won the job. As far as Cam being cut, I did have thoughts about that. I mean, I was telling people, but I do, Felger and Maz, I do a lot of appearances in New England. And, I was telling people, because it looked like the way Belichick handled it, that he was going to go with Cam Newton as the starter. But I thought Mac Jones would replace him somewhat soon, possibly to shorten the season for Mac Jones. I mean, because he's already looks like he's dealing with a left knee injury. And to go from Alabama, I look back at last year, and last year was a little bit different with COVID, but so they played 13 games. They had about a 3-week break in the middle of the season. They had about a 3-week break between the SEC championship game and the playoffs. They had 7 games that were blowouts, so he probably didn't finish those games. There were probably games where he wasn't even touched, even though in the biggest games, he was under a lot of pressure, and that was something that impressed me watching his film coming out. So I wasn't sure whether Belichick would just outright release Newton. I certainly had those thoughts, but that was impossible to predict. But I at the end of the day, that Mac Jones is the starter and Cam Newton is gone is not a total surprise to me.
What did you see like day in, day out in practice that convinced you that Jones was winning, that had won that job?
Well, Mike, I think the biggest thing, and you guys have known me for years, so you sort of know the way I watch the game, and I'm one of those film guys, and last year, to be honest, was a struggle watching the Patriots on film. I mean, to go from, look, I did my penance covering the Dolphins way back in the day, post Dan Marino, so I saw a lot of different, I had to go through the Joey Harrington and Dante Culpepper and Gus Frerotte years, AJ Feely, but I also covered Green Bay, so I got to see Favre. I got to see the beginning of Rodgers, and then to go to Brady for the previous decade was, just tremendous to watch on film. And last year was just rough. And the thing was, I was a Cam fan. I was in favor of them signing him. I wrote it before they signed him that I thought he could fit here, that they could play winning football with him. And I was patient with him throughout the year, but I know the way the Patriots operate, and you need to keep improving. Like, you can't just stay still, and you certainly can't regress. And by the time they got to that Texans game, I was done with Newton. I was done. He had not progressed. He was still slow. He's not making pre-snap reads. He's not even feeling like where the pressure's coming from. And in this offense, you just need those sort of intangibles to really operate it. And that Cam Newton was operating this offense on basically see it, throw it. Not a whole lot of anticipation. Certainly no really pre-snap idea what he's going to do with the ball. It hamstrings what the offense is. The offense at its core should have all the answers to what a defense presents. Pre-snap, post-snap, whatever. If you can operate the controls in this offense that Josh McDaniels and Charlie Weiss and Bill O'Brien and all these guys who built on top of it, what they put into this offense. And to me, it was clear last year that Cam Newton was not going to be able to get to those controls. And to me, it didn't make much sense, going forward with him. So once I saw Mac Jones, and I was in favor of him before the draft, I wrote a column saying that the Mac Jones hype was real. I did not buy into the popular storyline about it's Alabama, they're all talented, they're all wide open, this and that. Not if you watch the film. It was there on film. First day in minicamp with the Patriots, I was impressed. First day of training camp, I don't know if Gasper will remember this, but they were doing a Redzone drill, and I just turned to Chris Gasper and I said, "It's over. He's winning the job." It's just it's this timing. It's most of it, Mike, is the timing. Is the pre-snap, having an idea what the defense is going to do, and then getting the ball out on time. And I constantly throughout camp practices, I would use a stopwatch. I used to use it, for a punting competition. But now I was using for a quarterback competition. I would measure every snap to throw. And Mac Jones was clearly ahead of the games and ahead of Cam. He was clearly making the right decisions most of the time. And for me, I just thought, if this kid is here at this point, like 3-4 weeks into his NFL career, give him the keys and see where he can go with this. So those are the things that stood out to me.
It's interesting what you said about a red zone drill, because that brings up one of the ideas I think that people in the analytics community might have suggested was, would it make sense to keep Newton around as a short yardage and red zone weapon and like bring him in on like 3rd and 1s or goal line situations? But if you feel like Jones already has a handle on being in the red zone, then the added running value of having Newton in those situations is not necessarily as large as you might think it is.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I heard that chatter, and I certainly had those thoughts. Like, look, you basically run QB power. I mean, when you look back at, the Panthers in 2015 when Cam won the MVP and they went to the Super Bowl, I remembered I studied that offense a lot that year because I did a big cover story for Sports Illustrated going into that Super Bowl, and about how basically their running game from Mike Shula was basically, it was an old school running game. They ran everything from the Redskins counter tray to the power sweep of the Packers to all sorts of classic power football plays. They just dressed it up differently with an athletic quarterback, a guy who was in his prime at that time. And so you could say, okay, if they run QB power and they're pulling the guard and, things like that, okay, it could make sense. But all right, well, what if you need to throw, in the red zone? I mean, Cam has, in my mind, the biggest drawback on Cam, and I still think he fits certain offenses, but the biggest drawback is just Cam is just even at his best in this offense, he was a half a step late, in my opinion, with everything. And in the red zone, that timing is even more important.
It's interesting because there's been a lot of feeling about maybe his shoulder never fully got healthy, but your shoulder doesn't affect your timing. No, I agree with that. I didn't have a problem with Cam's arm. I had a little bit of a problem with his feet because, the people who haven't been watching, and I heard from a lot of these, the Twitter trolls out there who, when I said, like, my preferred room for the Patriots, and I said this after the Eagles got Gardner Minshew for like nothing, was Mac Jones, Gardner Minshew, and Brian Hoyer. That would be my room. Of course, you get people who come out and call you a racist. Knowing that this was coming, I would have loved to have had Minshew because I'm not a big Brian Hoyer guy.
Yeah, I understand that, and I don't think the Patriots are after the Chiefs game last year. They basically buried him after that, and I think he's basically there to be, Mac Jones's tutor. And I'm a big fan of Minshew, but I just think that Mac. I just don't think Cam Newton fit where this offense is going. And you're right. I didn't have a problem with his arm. I think he does fit other offenses more like, and I was just listening to Chris Sims's podcast, and I think Phil Simms made a good point about, like, I do think he fits Atlanta, with what they did with Tannehill. Tannehill's not you can't put Cam Newton back in the shotgun spread and expect him to operate it. You need him under center. You need play action. You need the run element. A lot of the stuff they did with Tannehill. That's why I don't think, despite some similarities between Dak and Cam, that Cam Newton is not a fit for Mike McCarthy's offense at all.
No, you're right. You want play action, 7-step drop, guy flying down the field, 50-yard bomb, and then something underneath you can go to, and usually wind up with a 6 protection there. So, if there's a rush, it's going to come a little late, and he's going to still be able to run away from it.
I think that would suggest he's not a good fit for Baltimore either. Like, I've seen that suggested, the idea of Cam Newton as a mobile quarterback, Lamar Jackson as a mobile quarterback. Like, maybe he should be backing up Lamar Jackson, but he's such a different kind of mobile quarterback. It's not about elusiveness.
Yes.
I think that's a great point. Or Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Aaron. And one of the things where I think Cam Newton's effectiveness dwindled last year in the second half of the year was teams realized, I don't really care if Cam Newton runs anymore. He doesn't have the same legs.
Right.
He doesn't have the same power. I remember, and therefore, and he's not. I will say he got better at executing the play action better this year in this camp. Last year, and this was a concern of mine coming into his New England tenure, watching, there was some, he's not a good play faker. This year he got better at it. But, I remember distinctly there was a play last year, the second matchup against the Dolphins, where I think it was like 2nd and short or something like that. Some yardage where play action would be effective. And Cam Newton, went through the play action fake, and the Dolphins linebackers just went back to their drops. They didn't even think about the run. And to me, at that point, I was like, well, I don't understand the point of this. None of it is working, but I do think his legs, and I talked to some NFL people after the season, and they just said, Cam's legs aren't the same. And he was a little bit heavy last year. I do think he trimmed down. I think he was a little bit better, but he's no longer the dual threat Cam Newton that you remember from 2015.
He's not going to escape in these like miraculous scrambles that you'll see some of the younger guys do. It's still, if you run some kind of read option, he's a big dude. He can go fast in a straight line. He can power it up. It's amazing what you're saying about the play action, because my memory of prime Cam was the mesh in the backfield that would like take 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. He would put that mesh out there with like a D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart, and he would yank it back at the next minute and run or throw. But I think what we have to remember, this is a dwindling memory. The guy we're talking about here is 2015, maybe 2017 Cam. You say year after year after year, maybe this year is the year he's 100% healthy and this, that, and the other thing. Clearly 2021 was not that year.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct, Mike.
Yeah. So the last question then is the locker room impact. Do you agree with the idea that people have talked about they kind of had to cut Cam because you didn't want to have a split locker room? And even though you'd rather have Newton as your backup than Hoyer, they needed to make sure that the locker room was all completely behind Mac Jones? Or do you think they just feel like Newton is so far gone that there really isn't that much of a difference between him and Hoyer as far as being the backup?
Well, I do think that, in my opinion, Cam Newton won the backup role. The reason that he is not here any longer, I think that I don't think it's the locker room thing. I think it's related to that, but I don't think there was no split in the locker room. I mean, just being at practice and watching the way all the guys reacted to Mac Jones, told me enough. And a lot of their words have been great about him. And I don't think the guys who have been around, and this was my point long ago when Mac came in and they're like, why is Cam here? I said, look, the guys on the team are going to know. They're going to know who won the job, and they know that Mac won the job and Cam would be the backup. Now, does having Cam Newton around take up some oxygen and things like that from, media and other fans and stuff like that if Mac is struggling? maybe a little bit. I mean, but I do like the move by Belichick to, basically burn the boats and just move on. Say we're going back in time. We're going back to our old offense fully, and we're going to have a quarterback room that's in alignment, whether that's, Brian Hoyer and Garrett Gilbert right now, even though I think that practice squad position is going to be interchangeable. I think we could see a bunch of guys come in who are like Garrett Gilbert. I do think that Jarrett Stidham, who, if people remember, last offseason when people were talking up Jarrett Stidham, I told them, it's not Jarrett Stidham. He's not going to be the guy. But I do think, from what I know, that Jarrett Stidham, before his latest back injury, he did earn more respect inside the building. I think they are more open to Jarrett Stidham being a factor. And so in my mind, I think in their mind, they think it's Mac Jones, Brian Hoyer, and after week 6, Jarrett Stidham, and we'll see whether he can win the number 2 job or not.
So let me ask you about the other big news of the week for the Patriots, because this is really important. Folks who read Football Outsiders know I've been really high on the Patriots playoff chances because of the defense, not the offense. Because in case you haven't seen from the chapter of the book, they have the biggest increase incoming talent on defense of any team in the last 18 years, when you count Hightower coming back plus all the free agents that they signed. The problem is you now take Stephon Gilmore out of that for at least a few weeks. So Stephon Gilmore goes on PUP. How much is Gilmore's situation about an injury, and how much is it about him being unhappy about his contract?
What's funny, Aaron, is I remember you and I conversing last year about basically, wasn't it the opposite for the Patriots last year?
The opposite last year.
and I kind of poo-pooed it.
Losing the most talent. Yep.
Yeah, I kind of poo-pooed it. I was like, they'll be able to scheme around it and whatever, run the ball.
I think
won't be that big of a deal.
Before COVID, though, because then once COVID took Hightower away, that was a little ridiculous.
Yeah, that's true. But I think last year was a great point by you guys. I think it's a great point again. And it's a very valid point about Stephon Gilmore's importance to this defense and what they have out there, which is basically J.C. Jackson, Jonathan Jones. I don't know if I've seen him take a snap on the outside at all, who is their second best corner or best corner. But he doesn't go outside for whatever reason. And so I don't know who the hell the third cornerback is now, with Gilmore on the shelf. How much do I think it was the contract versus the injury? Look, everybody's reporting different things. I can, Ian Rappaport said he won't be healthy till weeks 3 and 4. I could just tell you this. Look, the Patriots didn't pass him on his physical. Were they covering him so he didn't have to incur fines? Possibly. I don't know. I'll just say this. If Stephon Gilmore thought he was going to get paid, and apparently he doesn't just want a small bump for this year. He wants a big bump, and I think he wants to become a free agent after this year. If he wanted that without getting on the field after a surgery to repair a torn quad and prove himself, then I'm on the Patriots side on this. Normally I'm with the players. They should get everything they can. But as opposed to Jamal Adams and these other guys who finished the year last year, Stephon Gilmore had a down year and he was hurt. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to give him any more money. So in my mind, for the first 6 weeks, I'm game planning around it. I would try to go out there and trade for a cornerback. Anybody want Chase Winovich? You can, let's do a little swap here. And so Stephon Gilmore has to come back and he has to play well to get paid after this season. So hopefully, for the Patriots' sake, they are able to figure out the first 6 weeks. Stephon Gilmore comes back, is his usual self, and they have a great defense for the rest of the year. I just think that the injury is a factor. I think the contract is a factor. I just don't know how much is which, but I'm on board with how the Patriots have handled this because I'm sorry, I'm not giving an injured player any more money until he proves he's healthy to me, especially at his age.
I believe the replacement on the outside for him is probably Jalen Mills, a player Mike knows very well from Philly, who was a very different player as an outside cornerback than he was last year when he was like an all-purpose, like let's move him all over the lineup.
He's more of an all-purpose-y guy, I think. And you also brought on Sean Wade. And what I would say when you talk about trade, that cornerback ain't out there. Nobody's got a cornerback to spare right now. If you look at some of the things like Butler retiring and some of the other guys going on IR right now, nobody's got that cornerback to spare. So you're going to be rolling. I mean, at least you've got Jones and Jackson, so you can start and you can try to figure out where you're going to put Wade and Mills. But it is interesting because the model that Gilmore should have been following. Xavier Howard wanted the new contract. It was 3 years left and everything. He did show up for camp and kind of start doing his thing, and then they rewarded him. So the idea that, the Dolphins are doing that, but I think I'll play hardball with the Patriots. That doesn't seem like a logical approach to trying to get that new deal.
Yeah, when he's hurt. I mean, that's what I just don't get. I mean, I'm all for every player getting his, and Stephon's in a weird place where his next big contract is probably going to be his last big contract because I think he's going to be 31 by the Super Bowl. I'm not sure if I'm at 30 or 31. And so he's getting down to it. And so I understand. And, the best thing for him is to come have a big year, become a free agent. Somebody will pay him just like you said, Mike. There's a dearth of good cornerbacks in this league. I mean, I know the Saints have been looking for how long for cornerback help. And I think that as far as the Patriots and their, number 2, cornerback, it looks like Mills, who did not play with a lot of confidence this summer. Jawan Williams, who, it's just funny. I mean, just saying it out loud, between Jawan Williams and Jalen Mills, you're talking about two guys who are probably, and Sean Wade, okay, who are probably going to be better safeties than they are cornerbacks, and that's what the Patriots are sorting through to figure out the rest of their defense.
The old Otis Smith role, where you're kind of the guy who plays deep as the second corner and tries not to get burnt and waits for the mistake and picks it off.
Yeah, I agree. There's not corners available. There was a rumor going around on Twitter this morning that Denver wanted to make Bryce Callahan available. But first of all, it doesn't make much sense given what Derek Klassen said about how Callahan in the slot is so important to Fangio's scheme. And second of all, he's like Jonathan Jones. He's a slot guy. He's not an outside guy. So if the Patriots are looking for an outside corner, he doesn't solve the problem.
That's a team that has a lot of corners, though. If you wanted to try and make a deal, because I can see that,
maybe they get Ronald Darby instead.
Go get Darby, and then you can reunite the Eagles' secondary from 2017.
So let me ask you one other question before we let you go, talking about the Patriots defense. Matt Judon, or as I like to call him, Red Sleeves, because that's the only thing.
Yes.
Well, we're going to ask you two more questions. So first of all, Red Sleeves has obviously shown up huge, right? He looks amazing. Of the other new guys, who do you think is the most important new guy other than Judon?
On defense?
Yeah.
Well, Judon, look, I'll just say this. I mean, I think he's been good and he's certainly been impactful in the games. I will say I wasn't blown away with his practices this summer. He's a good player. I mean, and he's going to be a good player for this team. The guys who I think are going to be most impactful on defense, if I had to pick one guy, because you're really talking Godchow, Henry Anderson,
Mills, Harvey Lange.
Yeah, I love Anderson, and I'm glad they kept him. Like some of his preseason usage, you were like, oh my God, are they going to cut this guy? Because he gives them coverage all over the line, and he was great this summer. I'm glad that he stuck in. Quite frankly, I'd rather have him on the team than Dietrich Wise at 3-4 defensive end, but whatever. He's Belichick's binky. He's going to be here forever. And I love Dietrich Wise. He's a good player. I think he's a misfit for the scheme, but and he's a great locker room guy, so I understand. But let's be serious. But out of all those guys, I think the guy who's going to be most impactful is Christian Barmore, who dropped to the second round for for certain, how would I term this? Certain intangibles that some of the teams thought he might lack coming to the NFL. But I got to be honest with you, since he's hit the ground running at the Patriots, he's been tremendous. And normally you see with an interior rusher like him, that's all they do with him during his rookie year. But it didn't take very long where they've thrown him out there in base and practice and things like that. So that tells me that he's impressing them behind the scenes as well. And all summer he's been a force. None of the joint practices could the other team, the Eagles, the Giants, of course, the Giants can't block anybody. But he's been a force all summer. And I think at this point they got to steal. We'll see how his career turns out. But I think at least for a rookie, I think Christian Barmore is going to be very impactful this year.
This is the last question from Useful Title in our chat. You watched the joint practices. Was it true that the Eagles won the joint practices? Because that seems like a little bit of a weird spin from Sport Talk Radio, given that in the actual game, the Patriots shut out the Eagles, mostly backups.
At least there was really only one real day of practice. The second day was more situational stuff. And I wrote this. I said the Patriots got their ass kicked. They did. Really? They got their ass kicked on both sides of the ball, all over the place against the Eagles. And then in the game, the Eagles didn't play anybody. So that was the reason for the lopsided score. The Patriots
starting receivers, but the defense was like all backups.
Yeah, the defense was mostly backups. But Jalen Hurts looked like Patrick Mahomes against the Patriots defense in that practice. Trust me, I was stunned. I didn't think that was Joe Flacco looked good in that practice too. And now I was told by people around the Patriots, don't read too much into it. Like, we were vanilla on offense, we're vanilla on defense. Like, don't read too much into it. But I'm just telling you, the Eagles kicked the Patriots' ass that one day.
I got a totally different read from that. The thing I got, and I was watching them, I was up on the steps there. Was
I saw you there.
Yeah, the Cam and Mac were not playing. Cam was not playing well, and that Mac had a good hot early start, and then started throwing picks at the end of the practice. But that in general, like what you could see out of the trenches, I thought the Patriots were winning. So that's why
I thought the line stuff, the one-on-one stuff, I think the Patriots definitely held their own. But I thought in the team periods, in my opinion, I thought the Eagles were the better team, and trust me, I was very surprised by that.
NFL Philosophy says, by the way, with the secondary that they have, the Patriots are going to have to use everything they've got to go after the quarterback.
Absolutely. He's 100% right. And that's been my argument, which is, the Patriots personnel wise, you wonder about them. And look, their whole scheme is predicated on playing man to man. Like we know Jackson can do it. We know Jones can do it. We know Gilmore can do it. But can Mills, can Juwan Williams, Sean Wade, I don't think is going to get time anytime soon.
No, that's a trade for the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he's a good football player. It's just, where does he fit? And they'll figure that out. But their pressure is going to be hugely important in the first 6 weeks. They are going to need to sell out a bit with the pass rush. And I think we'll get an early indication. Are they really all that much better with, Judon and Barmore and, Kyle Van Noy? I was a big fan of him when he was here the first time. This time around, I don't know if the Miami experience sapped some of his confidence, which when he was with the Patriots, he certainly didn't lack, but he did not look like the same player on the field. To me, I think Hightower's fine. Josh Uche is the guy who is really going to pop this year.
On the preseason broadcasts a lot.
Yeah, he was really good this summer. That's why he's the reason. And, they drafted Ronnie Perkins. He's the reason why I'm like, I don't know how Chase Winovich sees the field. I don't like who are you going to take off the field? And they love to use their safeties. I think Duggar, Phillips, and McCourty are all going to be on the field at the same time a lot, especially in sub packages. So, I think Uche and Judon, in my opinion, it's interesting, Aaron. And I asked this of, one of the Patriots coaches the other day. Oh, I think it was Gerard Mayo. I said, because if you look at it, because they're really more of a 3-4 team now than they have been in many years. Yeah. And if you're looking traditionally, you got Judon on one side, you have Uche on the other, you have Hightower in the middle. They still love Bentley. Bentley's been out there all summer. Where's Kyle Van Noy playing? I mean, I assume he's going to split time with Bentley and be inside, and they'll get up some creative packages against certain personnel groupings, but just in a base 3-4, I don't know if Kyle Van Noy's in it right now. And he's a good football player.
Yeah, so they're deep in the front seven. And the problem is with defense is that it's a weakness system where the problem is your weakness. And And they have one at Second Corner. Greg Bedard, BostonSportsJournal.com. Thank you so much for joining us today and talking about the Patriots. We'll check in with you during the season. I really appreciate it, man.
Sounds good. Had a blast. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Now we are going to bring in Parker Fleming, who just entered the waiting room, and we're going to talk some college football. Mike is going to have to leave us at some point.
Yes. When Parker comes in, I think I'll make my exit. Hello, Parker. He's coming.
We're going to have Parker come in and say hello.
He's coming. I'm off to do dad stuff, ladies and gentlemen. But you will see me again next week.
Yes, Rutgers dad is off to do high school dad stuff.
Yes. Here we are. Hello, Parker.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Hey, it's my first time talking to our man Parker on the Twitch show or a podcast or anything else. I mean, this is a podcast and a Twitch show because it comes a podcast later. But now we're going to really confuse poor Philip, the producer, because we're going to have Mike say goodbye.
I leave you in excellent beard hands, ladies and gentlemen. Parker?
Seriously, I'm a little ashamed here. I've always kept mine so short.
Increase
My
your
advice
game.
is do nothing, and the beard happens. So,
All right, Mike. We'll see Mike later next week. All right, now it's me and Parker, and it's we'll have to fix your the little name below the title there. I believe it says Mike's name, but we'll get that fixed. There we go. And we're going to talk some college football. And as Mike pointed out to me when we were prepping the show, my God, college football starts off with a freaking bang this year.
it really does. They've done a good job.
This first week is, and Preston Pack, the new writer of Seventh Day Adventure, makes this point in the intro for tomorrow's column. But the problem last year was no out-of-conference games, right? So no out-of-conference games was a problem for, one, doing stats, because you didn't know how strong anybody was, because you didn't have interconnectivity. And two, just for the sport, because all those great interconference games that didn't exist. And so the week one is suddenly starting out not only with some big Big Ten conference games, but with some just really huge interconference games like Clemson, Georgia, and Alabama, Miami.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And the thing about the conference games last year too, and kind of the interconference stuff is, I mean, I just basically had to rely on priors, like what did 2019? And so you're making a lot of guesses. It was funny, like bowl season was kind of refreshing because it was like, oh, we didn't get any of these non-conference matchups. But yeah, I remember last year, Aaron, that Thursday night Central Arkansas UAB game. I feel like the entire world sat down and watched this random FCS game on a Thursday night to kick off the season. And
because we're so hungry for college football. Yeah.
And this year, man, like this entire weekend, I could start watching tonight and be, all the way through. And so like Boise UCF tonight, I think is one of the, I love to see these G5 teams kind of play each other. And then, you've got really, really solid games like Ohio State, Minnesota as well. So a full slate kind of starting out tonight and watchable games tomorrow night. And then Saturday is just jam packed.
Dude, I don't even watch that much college football. And even I watched UAB beat Jacksonville State last night.
Yeah. We were doing the podcast and I had it on in the background. I was all about it. Yeah.
So let's talk about, speaking of this weekend's big games, right? Clemson, Alabama, obviously these are two of your main contenders. Who are this year's top contenders for the college football playoff?
So I think that kind of comes to the philosophical question of how many teams are actually ever in the running for the college football playoff. And I really think that number is 6 or 7, right? So obviously you have Alabama because you just can't rule out Nick Saban. You obviously have Clemson, obviously have Ohio State. Those are kind of almost inarguable, even though all three of those teams are transitioning to new quarterbacks, even though all three of those teams might have lost some really good skill players and might have some potential weaknesses. You think about Ohio State's secondary, Clemson, their interior line, Alabama, maybe their wide receiver unit isn't as good as it was last year. And I think all three of those teams are firmly in the running. And then the question becomes, okay, who else is plausibly there? I think this is the year that Oklahoma has had circled for a really long time, with Spencer Rattler taking that kind of second step. It'll be, he'll be a lot more mature this year. I think their wide receiver unit will be nice and deep, even if, they only have 2 running backs on their roster right now. And so I think Oklahoma is your fourth team that's absolutely in it. If you go to the Big Ten, you could say you're right. There's a world where Michigan can win all their games. I don't think they're going to. I don't think they're feasibly in it. But the other team in the Big Ten that really, really stands out to me is Penn State, who had a down year last year, lost a fluky game against Indiana that honestly probably served as a little bit of like a morale killer there, and a game they probably should have won because of that call. And so I think they'll be a lot better this year. I think they've got a good, interesting transfer along the defensive line that should improve their kind of disruptiveness, and a wide receiver unit is a little better. And Wisconsin. So I say both of them. Wisconsin's my other team. I think they're playing an eliminator game this weekend because you kind of have that cross divisional Big Ten game, and so that right there puts me at 6 or 7 teams who could plausibly be in there. And then you start talking about fringe contenders. Do you believe Iowa State can get there? Do you believe Sam Howell and North Carolina have enough? Oregon, USC, are either of them going to break through? Washington's kind of a dark horse. So that right there is kind of the plausible set of who my main contenders. You kind of have that core. Brian.
It's like 3 teams that are almost assured.
Yeah.
In a rotating 4th spot. Like it's been that way the last few years, right? It's been Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and 4th team.
Yeah. Brian Fremo said the way he put it, I really liked. He said, about 5 teams are competing for 3 spots. And then maybe 7 teams, including some of those 5 teams, are competing for the 4th spot. And so you really kind of have, just a small handful.
It brings up one of the things we've talked about when we talk about college football a lot, especially for our NFL audience, which is that even though the players change so much more often because of graduation, college football teams are actually more consistent and easier to predict than NFL teams because the recruiting is so important and the same teams do well at recruiting year after year after year.
They do, and recruiting success breeds recruiting success, right? Because you go and you have a 5-star wide receiver be the first one to come to your team, and he goes off and goes to the NFL, and that gives you brand recognition. You're known as, the awful interminable debates about who is actually wide receiver university or whatever, but recruits pay attention to that and where guys are getting drafted and who's developing players. And so that kind of builds on itself. And then, additionally, the element in college football that I think is so interesting. So your NFL guys, they're all about we're talking about the cap and we're working on these, hey, what are the financial implications here and there? College football is a really interesting game of the guys who are really good at projecting a 4-year cycle and which players are going to last all 4 years, which players are not. So you think about Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, for instance, he's a 4-year cycle guy. They were great last year. They're probably going to be bad this year, just the way that his kind of collegiate cycle breaks out. But then Alabama, they're more on that 2-year cycle and kind of recruiting in a way a little bit more strategically for that. My model to predict games and year to year, I include a coach effect and a program effect just to account for, there are imbalances in facilities and travel and investment and staff that exist at the college level that are so larger than any kind of imbalances in training staff or strength and conditioning at the NFL level.
Yeah, it's absolutely. So talk about the teams that are not necessarily going to be competing for the playoffs, but that you think are going to be really fun and interesting to watch this year, like underappreciated. The one problem with the college football playoff is it brings everyone's attention towards the college football playoff when part of the fun of college football is all the different conference races and all the different rivalries and all the things that you don't have to go 10-1 to enjoy.
Right. Well, and that's funny, thinking about the 1 Foot in Bounds column on Monday morning and you and Vince being like, hey, maybe don't write about 13 G5 games this week. Like we can talk some about the playoff and some about the other teams, but we have to talk about the playoff. So I think there's actually a really interesting middle class. Speaking of G5, you'll get a team like Cincinnati, who returns almost all their production, was really, really talented last year, gave Georgia a good game at the end of the year. Coastal Carolina was really, really fun last year. Their offense is extremely novel. And so we kind of have they'll be interesting to follow because we'll have a nice test case for how much does novelty kind of help an offense now that people have tape on Coastal Carolina. Right there in the Sun Belt, I think that the Coastal Carolina's main competition for the Sun Belt is going to be Louisiana. Billy Napier, very obviously a coach who knows what he's doing, waiting for the right job to come open and has a lot of experience. That'll be a really fun G5 team. In terms of kind of other fringe Power 5 teams that might be exciting, I think Steve Sarkisian at Texas is someone you can't rule out. His offensive knowledge his experience and the fact that Texas has great talent, even if they've underperformed the last couple of years, lends them to be a really, really interesting team. I think if you go out to the West Coast, you can look at a team like Arizona State. They only played four games last year. One of those was a ritual sacrifice of Arizona 70-7, but Jayden Daniels is a really, really dynamic runner and a passer, and their offense is really exciting. And so I think that's a team who I don't believe will sniff the playoff, but is really, really exciting to follow. You start going down the line and you start saying, okay, who's gonna break out, and some of these teams are just interesting because they're stylistically weird. You think about Arkansas's offense with KJ Jefferson taking over for Felipe Franks. I think it's really interesting. A lot of people assumed that Franks was good at Arkansas just because of the system. Franks has looked okay in the preseason for Atlanta and might win that.
Yep.
Yeah, that backup job there. And so that's like, okay, well, maybe KJ Jefferson could do something in Arkansas.
What is it about the system at Arkansas? What's unique about it?
Yeah, so the offensive coordinator at Arkansas is Kendall Bryles. And I won't say too much about his history other than he's steeped in a very particular brand of offense that happened in the 2011 to 2015 Big 12 that a lot of people talked about basketball on grass. And so he is going to do a lot of space. He's going to do a lot of motion. Aaron, they do this play I love so much. They run an orbit motion and then they run speed option out of it, and it just looks so odd. But it's pretty good. It's a good way to kind of get your guy outside.
Speed motion to the speed option to the orbit guy or to another back?
To the orbit guy. They run like a pistol or a shotgun, and they'll have the orbit guy come in from the slot, go behind the running back. The running back will take a fake, or he'll just crash and block, and then they'll run speed option to the orbit guy outside. It's so odd. And they sling the ball. Speaking of Felipe Franks, highest completion rate on balls 20 plus yards downfield last year. So they were just absolutely going deep, a really fun offense. And so that one I think is another really, really fun one to look at. One that I have circled that I think is a little less sexy, but is still interesting is Kansas State. They lost to Arkansas State, a Sun Belt team, to start last year, and their quarterback got hurt in their third game. Looked like it was a mess. Chris Kleiman was at North Dakota State, won a bunch of championships, knows how to run a successful program. They have a ton of returning talent. And for the NFL fans, looking at a guy like Deuce Vaughn, who is an explosive running back, one of those kind of Percy Harvin, Darren Sproles kind of utility men who's all over the place. He'll be really fun to watch. I think with a really good offensive line, a competent, healthy Skylar Thompson at quarterback, Kleiman's know-how in a full offseason, Vaughn is poised to be a really explosive player for Kansas State.
Let me ask you, talking about returning talent, you talk about returning talent and what it means this year. Like, how does 2020's weirdness screw up trying to predict 2021 when it comes to things like interconference play and returning talent and all the things that are different this year than they usually are?
The biggest issue with returning talent, or the biggest reason it matters, is the asymmetry, right? And so insofar as Bill Conley, for instance, is one of the guys who kind of got that stat out there and started thinking about, let's look at returning production, not just starters or snaps. And so that's really good in a normal year to identify. For instance, I mentioned Northwestern. Hey, they're at the top of their development cycle. They're bringing everybody back from next year. They're pretty experienced. This is going to be a good team because they're going to be more experienced than most of their opponents, right? So that asymmetry in college football is really what gets you kind of the advantage. A couple of things, not only 2020's weirdness and the fact that everyone in college football got an extra year of eligibility. 2020 didn't count against your clock. And so you have a whole mess of super seniors. I believe, Aaron, the median returning starters on a college football team this year is 17 out of 22. So that's absolutely
remarkable. That's better than the NFL.
Everyone across the board is bringing back a ton of production. And so there isn't going to be that asymmetry. You couple that with the rise of these extremely polished high school quarterbacks who can come in. You think about how good Trevor Lawrence looked looking there, his first year, or Tua at Alabama, who's in the NFL now, or these guys are coming out of high school and they're running these sophisticated offenses. They have personal coaches. They don't need kind of that 2-year learning process like they used to. Of course, most quarterbacks do. We just have a lot more that aren't, that don't. And then you couple that with the third factor. So you have, everybody's returning production from 2020. These quarterbacks are ready earlier and earlier. Third, the transfer portal has made college football the Wild West. Everyone got a free
there's
transfer.
so many more transfers than there used to be.
It's so hard to keep up with. I was trying to scrape it every week, and it just was too much. I had to slow down a little bit and wait for dust to settle. And so that great realignment, I don't know how that's going to go, how that's going to look going forward. And so those are kind of three variables we'll have to look at. There are teams, Aaron, that have 35 seniors right now. You can only offer 25 scholarships a year. They're going to have to play the transfer portal to fill this. Some guys are going to have to get pretty strategic with this roster composition issue. And so that's really interesting about returning production as well, as we see kind of players pursuing opportunities to make more money in a smaller market and kind of be the number one guy, big fish in a small pond. Guys want a better stylistic fit. It'll be really interesting to see how returning production kind of pans out, because the asymmetry might not be as apparent as it was in the past.
I know that it's like programs, they recruit so many guys at a position. And then when you don't win the starting job now, the transfer portal makes it so much easier to go elsewhere. They were showing last night on the Jacksonville State UAB game, Clemson's quarterback room from 4 years ago. And like 3 of the 4 guys behind Trevor Lawrence have transferred to other schools at this point.
Yeah. And just very odd things. Appalachian State's starting quarterback is going to be Chase Bryce this year. He played at Duke last year and was bad. And so, but he's very experienced, and he'll drop down a level, and he might have a fine season at App State. And so I don't think statistically we've really tuned in, hey, how am I going to project this guy to do better? It's a lot like Dan Zimbrowski. I'm probably saying his name poorly. Baseball guy.
Yep.
He does he did a while back, the minor league equivalents, where he says, okay, if you were in Pawtucket and you hit 360, well, I'm going to adjust that to the major leagues when you go up to Boston, and we're going to adjust for that. I'm playing around a little bit. I try to think of G5 to P5 in those terms, but that's something we're going to have to dial in a lot more as these guys are moving up and down and kind of all around with the transfer portal.
Do you think a Group of 5 team can get a New Year's 6 bid this year?
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see who it is. They haven't changed the playoff yet, and so they are still reserving. There is a bid for the highest rated Group of 5 champion, and so I think that will be really, really interesting. Last year, Coastal Carolina was undefeated in the regular season.
I didn't realize there was actually a spot that's specific.
Yeah, there's like an automatic qualifier for one.
Good.
Yes. Okay. And so last year it was Cincinnati's to lose. BYU was undefeated until they played Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina's schedule was lacking, and so that's why we saw Cincinnati playing Georgia last year in the Peach Bowl. This year, some teams, the combination that you have to look for who's going to go to who's going to get the G6 New Year's.
The G5 New 6 bid.
Exactly. Say that 3 times fast. But is you have to look at who's going to be talented enough, who's going to have the schedule quality. And so that automatically lends you to think, all right, probably a team from the American, right? Because they're going to have kind of the best schedule.
That's sort of the highest G5 because they used to be a BCS conference. So they're sort of like halfway in between.
Yeah, they're kind of the old Big East, more or less. That was an automatic qualifier and tied into the Orange Bowl. So UCF, I think with Gus Malzahn at coach there, they played Boise tonight, and UCF Boise is going to be a game that's going to be a huge win for either of them, looking for the G5 race and getting into that New Year's 6. Cincinnati plays Indiana. That if they win that and win the American, they'd obviously be the favorite. That would be the strongest G5 win. A team like Nevada, who has a really great offense, Carson Strong is on draft boards, getting a lot of attention. They really just run the air raid, so I don't know how much that translates, but still, he's talented. They'll play Kansas State, and so they have to do a little rooting for Kansas State in the Big 12 to feel like they have enough schedule to get there. That's another interesting one. I look at SMU, for instance. Let's say that SMU, Sonny Dykes has a good offense going there. They've got a transfer, Grant Calcaterra, who retired from Oklahoma and should be a really great tight end. Reggie Roberson's an NFL wide receiver. Tanner Mordecai was at Oklahoma for a little bit at quarterback. If they beat TCU in week 3 or week 4, they'll have a pretty solid G5 or Power 5 win, and then they win the American. They're a fringe contender for it as well. So pretty much anyone at the top of the American, and then you look at Boise State and Nevada kind of out west as the 2 who might slide in there. BYU is in a real weird spot. Not only will they take a huge step back without Zach Wilson this year at quarterback, but they're not in a G5 conference, so they can't be a G5 conference champion. And so they're going to have to get an at-large bid, but then they're competing with all the Power 5 teams. So it's kind of worst of both worlds for BYU to get in there.
I don't quite understand. I don't know the economics of college football entirely, but I never quite understood BYU's decision to go independent.
Yeah, I think as much as it is a joke to say, hey, we want to be the LDS or the Mormon Notre Dame, they have a huge following. I remember TCU was in the Mountain West. BYU would play basketball on a Tuesday night in Fort Worth, and it would be full of people wearing BYU gear. They have a lot of turnout. They broadcast a lot of TV. But yeah, they are a little bit lost in the middle there. It hasn't necessarily been an issue last year. I don't think with their schedule, even if they had beaten Coastal Carolina, they wouldn't have gotten in over Cincinnati. So it hasn't ever, the rubber hasn't met the road there. And with playoff expansion, maybe the Big 12 expansion, they'll definitely be in the fold and be back to a kind of Power 5 status.
Tell me about your new Group of 5 award that you're giving out.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. Yes. It is called the G5sman, riffing on the Heisman there. And I think that when we look at recognizing, the most valuable player in college football, there is a very narrow lens. It's influenced a lot by the playoff. Who's going to be the best player on the best team? And I think college football is so fun because there is so much heterogeneity. There's so much difference from top to bottom and weirdness. And so I've assembled a panel of 30 voters, all around the internet, guys who cover the G5, guys who cover just general college football. And we are voting on we're going to give out a most valuable player, a Heisman type award for the G5. I've got a contract with a little trophy we're going to try and send, because with name and likeness, you can do these things now without, ruining a player's career. So there's some really interesting guys in the G5 that are going to be NFL guys as well. I think that are really exciting. You think about Sincere McCormick at UT San Antonio is a great running back. Jalen Tolbert at South Alabama, an excellent wide receiver. Guys like Nick Starkel out at San Jose State, who's throwing a ton of touchdowns against really bad competition, but has been around. So there's just a lot of guys to celebrate in college football that are under-recognized. And so this award, I think, will give them an opportunity to be recognized. So we're putting together, finalizing a watch list right now. We'll do a mid-season kind of finalists award list. And then we'll give it out, do a live stream and everything for the end of the season and give out that award. So I'm really excited for it. We've got some really, really sharp people who are voting and some people who I think will get a little traction with our live stream. So I'm pretty excited about it.
And then as for the big daddy award, the Heisman, who are our top candidates for this year?
Yeah, so I always lean towards the quarterbacks, right? You think about best quarterback on the best team. So again, talking about those playoff teams, you go Spencer Rattler, Oklahoma, DJ, whose last name I'm still working on pronouncing, from Clemson.
Uiagalelei or something.
Uiagalelei. Yeah, I'm still working on it. Bryce Young from Alabama, CJ Stroud, Ohio State, JT Daniels, right? Those are all right, the Heisman probably goes to the best player on the best team. The other ones that are interesting, North Carolina, Sam Howell, who is kind of dark horse sneaking up to take the QB1 away from Spencer Rattler for 2022 in the NFL. He and Derek King out of the ACC will be interesting candidates to follow. The non-quarterbacks are the ones that are really interesting to me.
Derek King, I should point out for people, is the quarterback at Miami who started out at Houston and then transferred.
Yes. And he and Dana Holgerson were going to sit out a year and revamp, and then he left. The non-quarterbacks are exciting to me too. A couple of Big 12 ones, Bijan Robinson out of Texas, Breece Hall out of Iowa State. Those two guys were pretty under. So Breece Hall had the most carries last year and really was like a volume kind of running back. Bijan Robinson was really underutilized, super highly rated. I think he'll have a breakout year. He might put up enough stats in Steve Sarkisian's offense to be in the conversation. Although with, the analytics and the attitudes, who knows if they'll actually recognize a running back or not. But yeah, those are kind of my, the core of feasible ones. A long shot that I really like. I see odds for Matt Corral from Ole Miss, 20-1 odds. Corral is in Lane Kiffin's system there. He throws the ball downfield all the time and is pretty sharp and should get on an NFL roster. I think Corral is interesting if they can beat an Alabama. If they can upset a Texas A&M, one of those games, I think he'll have enough national prominence and enough stats to kind of be in the running for that.
I think he might be this year's. He's the best chance to be this year's Burrow, like or Wilson, the out of nowhere quarterback who suddenly.
Yeah, he definitely has more hype than both of them coming back, but I think that is because we're looking for who that guy is going to be. But the elements are there. A lot of continuity on the offensive side of the ball, an offense that prioritizes, quarterbacks not having to make a ton of decisions. He's mobile enough. He's really accurate downfield. I think he could be the guy that we say, okay, I thought he was a tier 2 quarterback, and he is decisively a tier 1 quarterback.
Parker Fleming, thank you so much. Writes the 1 Foot in Bounds Monday wrap-up college column for us at Football Outsiders. He's at StatsOWar on the Twitter. Check out his sites, cfb-graphs.com, for tons of advanced college football stats. That does it for the Football Outsiders Radio Hour on Twitch for this week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching us on YouTube. Thank you for listening to us as a podcast. And we'll be back next Thursday with a preview of week 1 in the NFL. We are psyched to play regular season games. Check out all of this weekend's college games because football is fully here. Talk to you guys next week.